We're moving on. We're moving on, people. Moving on. We're doing Lost Boys, which happens to be today, the day that we're recording this, is the 33-year anniversary of this film. Jude, did you do that on purpose?
No.
Yes, she did. Just say yes, Jude.
Yes. Is today the 30th?
Today is the 33-year anniversary. I saw it on Twitter today. Yeah. There's a big old post from some big verified account saying, "Happy anniversary, Lost Boys, 33 years."
Oh.
So good job.
Makes my heart all aflutter.
There you go. All right. So who wants to set the stage for Lost Boys? Real quick. You don't have to get super deep into it. Jude, take it away. Go ahead.
The synopsis is, so this was released July 31st, 1987. The budget was $8.3 million. Its gross was 32 and some change million. It was directed by Joel Schumacher. It stars Jason Patric, Corey Haim, Kiefer Sutherland, and Corey Feldman.
You can't forget Alex Winters either.
Bill S. Preston, Esquire.
Bill Vampire.
Right. Yes, the Bill Vampire. Okay, the synopsis is, a mother and her two sons move to a small coast town in California. The town is plagued by bikers and mysterious deaths. She has two sons. The younger son is, he makes friends with two other boys in town who claim to be vampire hunters. The older son, he starts sleeping days and nights, and he kind of like stays out all night, and he makes friends with like kind of this biker gang, and he just kind of gets obsessed with this girl named Star.
Your parents were ex-hippies too, huh?
Yeah.
As a first-time viewer of this film, which I know is probably a cardinal sin in the movie film industry of people who talk about movies, I've never seen Lost Boys, and it's always been that kind of thing where I'm like, everybody loves it. It was in the 80s. It's got Kiefer Sutherland in it. I love him. He's super cool.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever wanted to watch this movie because I knew that the perception of it was better than what I would actually think of it. So like when everybody's like, "Oh, I love Lost Boys, such a great 80s vampire movie." I'm like, "All right, cool. I'll take your word for it." Because I don't want to watch it. Because if I do, it's going to ruin it for me. And it did. This movie. Oh my God.
You're welcome.
Where do I even start? I'm going to start with Corey Feldman. That's who I'm going to start with because immediately.
You need to leave him alone. He's been through a lot.
I understand that and I respect him for the fight that he's taken on. I get it. I'm not talking about that right now.
The next 45 minutes of this podcast will be white noise. I mean, unethical, unracial noise.
Okay, Jude.
I'm very grumpy.
It will be beige,
right now?
beige noise.
Corey Feldman's like, "I'm a big man" voice. Like, it was super weird.
You ever been with a big man?
You ever been with a big man? Like, the whole time in this movie, he was trying to act like he was like 10 years older than he was.
There's a reason for that.
It's
Yes.
super weird, and it did not come off very well at all. It was
so
dumb.
Just let Kadish go.
That was not.
He didn't get to
fault.
talk at all for the first movie. Just let him go.
You ever been to San Carla? We got vampires here, man.
You ever been to a big San Carlo?
Like this voice is coming out of like a 12-year-old, and it's so bad.
So originally he was just using his normal voice when he was performing in this movie, but Joel Schumacher,
of course, Schumacher.
Yeah, Schumacher came in and his exact words were, "Corey, I want you to butch up your voice a bit."
Oh.
And Corey was like, "What do you mean by that?" And Joel Schumacher said, "I want you to go to the video store and watch Rambo and Chuck Norris movies, and I want you to act like them." And so
then cast an older person.
Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman was already cast by the time Schumacher came on board. But Corey Feldman, basically, he's doing an impression of Sylvester Stallone and Chuck Norris in this movie, and that's why his voice sounds the way he does.
It's terrible. It's awful.
Well, blame Joel Schumacher.
I do blame Joel Schumacher.
Don't blame Corey Feldman.
It's so bad. It's so bad, and it distracts me.
It's not bad, though.
It's terrible, and it distracts me so much from the rest of the movie. And I'm the whole time.
He's like such a minor character.
It doesn't. No, he's a huge character. He's the one who drives the whole story to where like the vampires are, and let's go kill the vampires. And I know how to do it. Like him and his little buddy,
the Frog Brothers,
the freaking Goonies Light, are like, or the Monster Squad Light, are like, "Hey, let's go kill some vampires. We know what we're doing." And the whole time they're just bumbling idiots.
Well, it's funny, Alex, because originally this movie was pitched as Goonies with vampires.
Of course it was.
And it was supposed to be like younger kids, kind of like sixth graders fighting ninth grade vampires. And Richard Donner, the director of Goonies, was actually originally attached to direct. And eventually he backed out to go and do Lethal Weapon. And so when Joel Schumacher came on, he was like, I don't want to do these young kids things. I want to make it sexier. And so like he aged up the kids and basically said, I wanted to teenage this movie.
Yeah, everybody else works. The older brother, the star, she was a pretty famous actress. I recognized her when I saw her.
Jamie Gertz.
Yeah. And then Keith Sutherland. Like that whole crew, Alex Winters, that whole age group, that whole thing worked for me. I was like, I bought every single one of them. I bought their performances, and I bought the idea that their whole dynamic was going on. I'm like, I'm in for that. But when they introduced, what's the main brother, the vampire brother? Michael. When they introduced Michael's brother, his younger brother is kind of the one who has to take the fight to the vampires for whatever reason. That completely cut the legs out from underneath this movie. I was like, I do not believe for 1 second that this idiot kid is going to go and take down some like 18, 19-year-old vampires in a group of motorcycle gang orgy. I didn't buy it. And then Corey Feldman comes in with his Rambo voice, and it just ruins the entire film for me. And I couldn't, when they went and they finally got to the vampire lair and they go in there and they kill Bill the vampire, and I'm like, okay, are they going to do this? No, of course not. They're going to scream and run away like a bunch of little pussies. I was like, this is why you don't cast kids in your freaking movies. Like if Corey Feldman would have been like 17, 18, same age as Michael, maybe a little bit younger, and had done that same thing, but had like stayed true and had some guts, then it would have been an interesting movie. But no, they ran away like a bunch of little pussies, and they're punks. And I hate kids in movies. It ruins everything.
Fun fact, the name Michael is said in this movie 118 times. It averages out to one Michael per minute of screen time.
Am I wrong that these dumb kids ruined this movie?
You are wrong.
This is awful.
Yeah, you're wrong.
No, I am.
You're wrong.
Whatever. All right, tell me what you like.
You didn't like Goonies. You didn't like Monster Squad. It's no surprise you didn't like this
Kids
movie.
are freaking stupid.
You just don't like children.
Kids who outsmart and outwit and outstrength, apparently, like legit vampires.
I can't wait to see the therapy bills for your children. Daddy hates us.
No, I just make sure that they don't think they're smarter than me, and they're fine.
Again, therapy bills. Daddy, why aren't we as smart as you?
You can't outsmart me. You're not going to get that extra piece of cake.
Yeah, typical fathers want their kids to be better than them.
Yeah. I'm raising my children to not be smarter than me.
No, I'm sorry, but
I'm keeping them dumb.
Like these young kids that like decide to go and murder this motorcycle gang of vampires, I didn't buy it. Everything else, Michael's whole storyline, I thought was really interesting. His love interest with Star, his conflicting, like I'm a vampire now, but I don't want to murder people. Like I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then the big reveal at the end that the father was like the ultimate like Dracula vampire guy who was leading the whole crew. Good twist. Great twist.
I thought that was the most interesting part of the whole story was that Max had been a vampire for who knows how long, and he had made other vampires, and ultimately what he wanted was a family, and what he was lacking was his partner. He had his sons, and what he needed for them was a mom.
Wait, is Max the good guy to you?
Jude's like ashamed to admit it.
She's like squirming in her chair.
I get it.
He's not the good guy.
Honestly, Max, show me a ring. I'll marry you.
Everything.
I'll be your vampire bride.
It's all I've ever wanted is to be a vampire.
I like everything else about this movie.
I don't want to get older.
Everything about this movie worked for me, except for the damn kids. They ruined the entire thing for me. I couldn't watch it at the end. I was like,
except for all the characters in the movie,
they're not as a vampire partner.
It's literally just like 3 or 4 characters, but there happen to be the ones that like drive the action. And I'm like, this is so dumb. You have a much better character in Michael, and he spends half the movie like, I can't. I'm ashamed. Oh, I can't do it. I'm so tired.
Well, the actual person of Michael, Jason Patrick, never wanted to be a famous movie star. So that might have had something to do with it.
I don't know. Like Keith Sutherland, Alex Winters, like that whole motorcycle gang crew is really cool.
Keith Sutherland, come for me.
That mullet, that bleach blonde mullet, man.
I'll eat it for dinner.
God, so weird. Yeah, I don't know how many times I'm going to say this, but the kids ruined this movie. 100%. It's terrible. I give it a 1 star. This is a 1-star crap fest. Where's that soundbite, Kadish?
I couldn't fit it on the soundboard.
Everything.
I hate everything.
The movie's stupid.
It is so stupid.
It is not a 1-star crap fest.
right.
I love this movie.
Okay, well, tell me what you love about it besides the weird man crush you have on Max.
Honestly,
Well, what other type of crush is she going to have?
I don't know.
I have so many crushes throughout this film. It will take me a while. Kiefer Sutherland.
Mm-hmm.
No, like I get the story of like Max. I don't know how long he's been a vampire, and I don't know how long he's been creating vampires, and how long he's been trying to create this family of his vampire sons, and how long it took for him to come to the conclusion that what he was lacking in his family dynamic was a mother. And I get the storyline of, Lucy, you're what I need to make this work. And I just need for you to get on board.
He was manipulating her.
Shut up. What I need for you to get on board is for me to manipulate your sons into this family dynamic, and then you'll be stuck with me. And
I like the baby vampire.
That's how I'll get you.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is a broader dynamic than what I want to get into, but it's I don't know. I relate to it in a way that, like, it's just very easy to trap a person into what you think you need versus being vulnerable in telling them what you actually need. So I was here for it. I had space for it. I got it.
Full on like therapy session with this movie.
I totally got Max, and I was here for it. And I was like, Max, you know what you need? You need a good woman. Got it.
Good Lord. That's way more than I got out of this movie. Kadish, why don't you tell me why I'm wrong?
Tell him why he's wrong.
Why Corey Feldman's Rambo impression didn't ruin this movie.
Well, because it didn't. You know, I always like to kind of look into the making of films and try to take that into consideration as I'm like judging them.
Yeah.
And this film was very interesting because, so first of all, it was inspired by Peter Pan. And basically this was a take on these two, the initial screenwriters of the movie. Basically, they were watching Peter Pan one day and they're like, you know, Peter Pan, he never ages. He only comes at night, you know, and all this other stuff. And they're like, he's a vampire. And they're like, whoa, what if Peter Pan was a vampire?
You guys hear the theory that Peter Pan is death and he comes to take the children?
Well, regardless,
It's the same kind of vibe we're going.
So, you know, in Peter Pan, the group of kids that all live with him in Neverland who never age are called the Lost Boys. And so that was the impetus for the title of this. And, you know, the script was originally supposed to be a reimagining of Peter Pan with vampires. And, you know, Joel Schumacher, when he came on board, he's like, you know, this movie's too much like Vampire Goonies. So let's give it a teenage makeover. And so one of the first things he did was that he brought on a new screenwriter named Jeffrey Boehm, who basically came in and rewrote the entire movie. So like all the original script was basically like tossed out and Jeffrey Boehm redid everything. And for those of you who don't know who Jeffrey Boehm is, he also wrote another movie we're going to be talking about a little bit later called Inner Space. And he also did Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and Lethal Weapons 2 and 3 and a bunch of other good movies. So when Schumacher came on, he basically looked at vampirism as an allegory for homosexuality. And he layered in lots of subversive kind of gay subtext into this movie. Like Joel Schumacher, like he was a well-known gay man. In fact, he once boasted that he'd had over 20,000 sexual partners in his life.
He bragged about that?
Yeah. Like he's up there with Wilt Chamberlain in terms of how many people he's had sex with. So basically, he looked at vampires and he was like, I just want to make this movie sexual, you know? And so like if you look at vampirism as allegory for homosexuality, this movie takes on like a completely different kind of angle, I guess you could say. So basically he modeled all the young Lost Boys, like the Kiefer Sutherland crew, after what kind of people who were at the time going to gay clubs like dressed as. So like they had that kind of hair and like the outcast miscreants and stuff like that.
Oh, we didn't talk about the saxophone player.
Well, we will.
Good Lord.
We will. But like, if you think about it, so Daddy Vampire Max, he's almost like a kind of vampiric Jeffrey Epstein, where he's just like basically preying on all these young boys in town and turning them into vampires.
Man, that's dark.
Yeah. And, you know, like Joel Schumacher told Corey Feldman to butch up his voice. And basically, like this whole movie, Schumacher kind of designed it for the MTV generation.
Yeah.
Like the look, the feel, the music, everything was meant to appeal to all the kids who were like super into MTV at the time, but also with like this like kind of weird homosexual subtext to it. Like if you remember Corey Haim's Room, Schumacher had just come off of St. Elmo's Fire, which was like his big kind of breakout movie. And so he had posters of all the cast from St. Elmo's Fire in the movie, but the most prominent one is this very weird poster of Rob Lowe showing off his abs.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like so out of nowhere. And the funny thing is like in the actual movie, the town is called Santa Carla.
Yeah.
But in reality, they shot in Santa Cruz. And in the movie, they call Santa Carla the murder capital of the world, right? Like as they're driving into town, the kids see painted on the back of the sign, you know, welcome to Santa Carla, murder capital of the world.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Santa Cruz, where the movie was shot, was actually called the murder capital of the world because of years of serial killing by 3 different serial killers in the 1970s. So that town had 3 different serial killers operating out of it at one point, which resulted in 28 murders over the course of a 30-month period.
Wow.
Like the press had dubbed it Murder Town USA.
Yeah.
And so like it kind of had this moniker. And because of that, the town didn't like they wouldn't permit movies to show them in a bad light. So like if bad stuff happened in the town, they had to change the name of the town. So it couldn't be Santa Cruz. So, you know, they rearranged a couple letters and called it Santa Carla, which I thought was kind of funny.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Makes sense though, in context with the movie.
So the saxophone player.
Oh my God. This was
Sexy Sax
Yes.
Man.
No.
His name is Tim Capello, and he was primarily known for his saxophone work in supporting Tina Turner in the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, so he was just like a legit musician.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've been drinking a lot. Musician. And this is the thing that he is the most remembered for throughout his entire career is Sexy Sax Man.
Yeah. And
This is what he's referred to by multitudes of fans is Sexy Sax Man.
and Schumacher, who, you know, is a gay man, he's seen him perform. He's like, oh, that's a sexy man. And so
Sexy
like,
Sax Man.
Yeah. And so he like when Schumacher wanted to sex up the movie, he's like, I'm going to put in Tim Capello.
Get that sexy saxophone player over here. Boobs. No, it's the opposite.
That guy had
Man
some
boobs.
sexy sax boobs.
Yeah. And like for those of you who might not have seen
Which
this movie,
should be the name of the episode is Sexy Sax Boobs.
like there's a whole scene where like the kids kind of go to this like on the beach concert
And
party
this
thing.
bro is, if you haven't seen this movie, this bro is
He is-
thrusting.
Just picture like The Rock oiled up with a
Yeah.
saxophone, just
Like,
thrusting
Just
like there's no tomorrow.
thrusting
got this chiseled
to
body.
the rhythm of his sax.
Like his skin's all shiny because he's all oiled up. He's got this saxophone, his
And leather pants.
and he's just gyrating to his sax music.
It's so over the top.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is that kind of movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
And Schumacher wanted to feature him because he believed Capello brought a lot of sex appeal to the film. Like,
He was in it for like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
yeah, but it's a very memorable 3
Get
seconds.
rid of the kids. Get rid
Yeah.
of the kids, and that
Just
would have worked.
Spend an entire movie on Sexy Sax Man, and I'm there for it.
Sexy Sax Man coming
Sexy Sax Man.
August 2021.
Cheers, B.
Cheers.
Vader, what did you think of Sexy Sax Man?
I hate everything.
Boobs.
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 Was there boobs in this movie? I don't remember.
No.
Did Star show anything?
No, there were no
Just
boobs.
sexy sax boobs.
Just sexy sex. Gyrating.
And it's actually funny because the way that Jamie Gertz got cast in the movie, like she had just done a movie with Jason Patric.
It's because
called
they confused her with Terry Hatcher.
That's what I was thinking. I thought it was Terry
I
Hatcher.
confuse her for Terry Hatcher
I'm like, that's the chick from Superman.
every time.
So Jamie Gertz had done a movie with Jason Patric called Solar Babies. And basically Jason Patric had kind of developed a crush on her over the course of their filming that movie. And so he wanted time to kind of work on her some more. So he suggested her to Joel Schumacher. And Joel Schumacher's like, I really want Star to be kind of like a wafy blonde, like almost like a Meg Ryan type. And Jason Patric's like, no. You got to get Jamie Gertz for this. You got to get Jamie Gertz for this. And so like finally like he convinced Schumacher to cast her in the role.
Yeah, she fit fine, I think. She did a good job in
Yeah.
the role. She made sense.
She was wafy.
I like the... Yep.
let me see what my notes are for this movie.
Okay.
Lost Boys, 1987. Okay, there. So I wanted to get into the lore of vampires. So in this movie, they are transparent in the mirror.
Yeah, transparent, not invisible.
Yes.
Yeah.
The immediate transformation, which is when he took part in the blood wine.
Yeah.
Killing the daddy vamp turns the babies / half vamps back.
Yeah.
The invitation renders you powerless, which in other vampire lore, it's just that they can come in.
Yeah. They can't enter your house unless
I
you're
thought that was
invited.
interesting that the invitation renders you
Which
powerless.
is the same thing from Fright Night, too.
Well, no, not necessarily, because if it renders you powerless, then anything that you would do to defend yourself against a vampire, it renders you powerless if you've already invited them in.
Yeah, but the cross didn't work in Fright Night, did it? That night when he came in?
But the stake did.
Well, it's a stake.
It kind of worked, but he like moved his arm away before he could use the cross against them in Fright Night.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think that's a bit ambiguous. Some mind control and flying, minor transformations, the dead man's blood thing, which I think is key in vampire lore. Like in some vampire lore, you can drink from the dead. In some vampire lore, you cannot. Day walking, piercing the heart with whatever, and the familiar. Putting up
Did they have
My
familiars
quotes.
in this movie? In The Boys?
the pet dog familiar of Max. He had a pet dog.
A dog.
Yeah.
Does
Thorn.
that count as a familiar?
Yeah, that's his familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
It guarded him while he slept during the day.
Yeah. So
okay.
versus in Fright Night, his familiar was his roommate.
Yeah.
Although they never really said what that guy was. in Fright Night.
Yeah.
A Frankenstein
it's-
type thing.
yeah,
huh?
who
Couldn't die.
knows?
We didn't
Like-
even mention him when we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Shame on us.
Yeah, shame on us.
Keep going.
And that's really all I have for
Okay.
for this movie. Is just like the different rules
Yeah.
of vampires.
Well, interestingly enough, so Jude's a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And this movie was one of the biggest influences on Joss Whedon in the
bet.
creation of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So not only did he take the idea of like teenage vampires who can look normal and then like turn into, creatures of the night, he basically, like took the phrase vamp out. Like this was the first movie to use that phrase, and they kind of co-opted that for Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Goddamn shit sucking vampire.
Yeah.
Which is the sexiest way to refer to a vampire.
Kiefer Sutherland's character David was a heavy influence on the character of Spike.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and actually, oddly enough, Fright Night.
Keith David?
No, Keith.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland.
Okay,
yeah.
sorry. I think I missed
His character's named David
Oh,
in Lost
Michael.
Boys. Well, Michael's the Jason
brother.
Patric character.
The main character. Who is the main character? Is it Michael or is it his brother?
It's Michael.
Okay, good.
There's
a piece of
but
shit.
funny enough, when we were talking about Fright Night, we forgot to mention that Buffy the Vampire Slayer took inspiration from the makeup effects, and in Lost Boys, the makeup effects directly influenced how the vampires in Buffy the Vampire Slayer looked, because they basically just stole the effects from this.
I mean,
movie.
it's just like a forehead ridge and some contacts and some teeth.
yeah.
Which I thought the interesting thing, there was a little bit of a change in Lost Boys where the vampire's teeth are more towards the front, almost like instead of like the canines. Usually they're more set back, but in this movie they were like
Yeah, and this movie, we talked about the contact lenses in Fright Night, and they did another thing in this movie where they kind of had streamlined the contact lenses a bit, but this was the first movie to actually use like full like eye contact lenses, the ones that covered like the entire eye. And it was funny because there's a scene where Kiefer Sutherland is trying to grab, one of the Coreys as they're trying to escape their lair after they kill Bill the vampire.
Yeah, the worst scene in the movie. Yep.
And
Bill the vampire.
And he gets his hand burned and he pulls back and there's a shot and like a little tear rolls down his cheek. And that was actually an accident because the contacts were irritating his eyes so much that he just watered up and a tear escaped. And Schumacher was like, "That looks great. Let's keep
Gorgeous.
it."
Yeah, he's so sad that Bill is dead.
It's beautiful.
And
filmmaking.
And in the blood for this movie, they actually put in glitter, like silver flakes in the blood.
Is this what started the Twilight shining
No.
vampires?
No.
I'm talking about the blood, not the vampires, dude.
Yeah,
Like,
but
but they added it to the blood in order to make it look better on screen. So like it gives it this shimmering appearance.
That sounds like an influence on Twilight.
So the thing that
The vampires
I
sparkled
think-
in Twilight, not the blood. Have you
All
even
right.
seen Twilight?
No.
Yeah, okay, I thought so. Yeah.
I have some factoids on that. So the thing that I think influenced the shimmering vampire of the Twilight vampire series is the Anne Rice. So Anne Rice was one of the first, I think she was the first writer to make a romantic vampire, and how she described her vampires were their skin was like porcelain and it was reflective of light. And that's where I think the glittering vampire kind of came from. So it went from the Anne Rice, so porcelain and fair that it reflects light, to when light hits us, we become a disco ball.
And it's really funny because in both Fright Night and this movie, they kind of take the typical vampire lore, like stuff that you've seen from movies and in Lost Boys case, comic books, and basically say like it's all real. And what was interesting is like one of the scenes that we get introduced to the Frog Brothers in this movie is when Corey Haim goes into the comic book store. And by the way, this was the first time the two Coreys appeared together and kind of launched the whole like Corey Haim, Corey Feldman team up.
Yeah, ruin the movie? Yeah, cool.
But they go into the comic book store and it's very blatant that like where they showcase both Batman and Superman. And what was interesting is Richard Donner, the guy who was originally supposed to direct this and he went on to produce the movie, he made the original Superman movies. And then Joel Schumacher went on to direct Batman movies. And so like I just thought that was kind of
You
interesting.
ruined those movies too. Wow, what a shocker.
He gave Batman nipples.
Anyway, all right, final thoughts on Lost Boys. I'm just going to, I said it once again. I don't know how many times I'm going to say it, but just like if you cut the Coreys out and you cut the little brother and the stupid.
Basically, if you cut out every character in the movie.
No, that's not true.
Actually,
that's not what I'm saying.
Before we move on, I wanted to ask you, so like at the end of the movie, the grandpa shows up and kills Max.
Oh, yeah. What's your take?
And there's this kind of controversy surrounding the ending where he goes to his refrigerator. And so like there's a special shelf in his refrigerator that has his root beers on it, and no one's allowed to touch his root beers because that's just for him. And after he kills Max, he goes to his refrigerator, opens the door, pulls out a root beer, and as he's drinking, the bottle of root beer, you can see that it looks like it's blood. And there's been this theory.
Red tinged.
There's this theory that the grandpa was actually a half vampire who's never killed a human, so like he never fully turned, but he's like kind of like how Michael was, where like it was theorized that this woman that he keeps seeing, the widow,
Widow Johnson.
the widow Johnson was actually a vampire who turned him, and he's just been kind of like chilling out in retirement, trying not to kill. And like he goes out, he kills animals, takes their blood, and then does taxidermy on them. And that's why he has all these like stuffed animals in the apartment.
You know what that sounds like? Twilight. Because you know what those vampires do to stop from killing people? Kill animals and drink their blood. No, all this stuff. It sounds very familiar. It sounds like it's stuff from Twilight. I like that theory, though.
It's vampire stuff. So do you think the grandpa was a vampire at the
Now
end?
I do.
I don't.
No? Do you think he's like a Van Helsing type thing?
I think he was a human who knew there were vampires. It was like, these vampires.
I love that last line in the movie.
I love
like
that.
The problem with this town, too many fucking vampires.
Too many vampires. Ugh,
So he
can't
knew
deal
all
with
along.
it. Yeah,
right?
yeah. I feel like he's just a human who's just like, ugh, these vampires, gross.
And we got to say,
And I don't think that he's a vampire.
we got to say that we didn't even mention this. Like, this movie has one of the greatest 80s
I'm a
power
little annoyed
ballads
right now.
ever composed. The Cry Little Sister theme. Oh my God. I love that song.
Music's good in this movie.
Music's really good.
Yeah. Just take the kids. Anybody under the age of 15, cut them out of the movie. Perfect movie.
Kadish
just take the-
listens to this soundtrack in the shower and just like makes
Cry,
muscles.
little sister.
He just makes muscles at himself.
If
in
you
the
just
mirror.
focus on
Yeah.
Michael, leave the little brother behind.
The child choir. And
Yeah.
like the,
oh,
Yeah.
the child
like
choir.
the gothic organs. And
Thou shalt
not cry.
Yeah, that was creepy. Really creepy. But anyway, anybody under the age of 15, cut out of this movie. It's a perfect movie. Stick with Michael. Focus on Michael and Grandpa and his mom and that whole dynamic. Perfect. It works. I think it was a great movie. You add in the Corys and all that other
Take out
bullshit.
the saxophonist.
You can leave that if you really want to. You can leave that in there.
Sexy
But
Sax Man.
Take the comic book
Take
kids,
down that Rob Lowe poster.
the
That's
Goonies.
the only reason why you don't want your children over 15 to watch this is because they'll get too incited by Sexy Sax Man.
The 80s were a strange
Yeah.
time, man. I'll tell you what.
They'll start gyrating in the
That's
kitchen where you don't want them to.
Those are my final thoughts on this movie.
To
Just
jazz.
get rid of the Corys.
You don't want jazz gyrating children.
All right. Moving on, I guess.
Matt Vader, what did you think of this movie?
The movie's stupid.
Yeah. Thank you, Vader. I agree with you, sir.
Thanks for keeping us on
I
track.
disagree. Vader loves vampires and boobs.